I used to do a lot of tutorials with Amapi. That program is not exactly the latest generation anymore, but some of the techniques are still very applicable and interesting. And I'm going to try to show some examples of things we can do. This one was long ago when I was working on that tutorial with Amapi on how to make a cartoon elephant. There's a lot of other things we can do, and this won't be with Amapi. This now is going to be with Anim8or. I'm browsing through some of the old pages on my website, and I'm seeing some memories from 10, 12 years ago, tutorials on, yeah, see, these are all gone, so it's a bit difficult to find them now. There's one on the sweater. There's one of my favorite organic modeling or sculpting tutorials. Yep, there's still some there. And I'm sure we'll be able to do very similar things. There's alien spaceships. And we'll probably be able to do something very similar. Oh yeah, definitely. In Anim8or. So let's get started here. Let's see. In fact, I've started to use Anim8or to make a new version of the elephant, but I'm not too happy with the eyes yet, so I'm gonna need to work on that a little bit. I think before we do the whole tutorial on the entire elephant, I want to just show some of the techniques and some of the basic steps involved. And as I'm learning, I'd like to share that. So if you are a new user with Anim8or, hopefully that will be of value and of use for you to learn to make some models quickly yourself. So here are some examples. If I open another example of something I've created, this is some sort of a wacky little thing. Select it, rotate around it, rotate it around. There is a lot of value in experimenting with this, because some of these you might use for new fancy brush images. And so let's see how we can do this one, for instance, and then perhaps the first basic steps on modeling with what will ultimately be the cartoon elephant tutorial. All right, so to create something like this, let's start from scratch. Let's create something new, and we'll probably be, let's go to the view for all views, perspective, front, top, and left, and let's make sure we're in the mode which is the object creation mode, right? Because this is kind of like the equivalent to rooms in some other programs, where you have a modeling room and you have a figure posing or assembly room, and then a sequence creator and the scene assembly, where you put everything together for your camera and lighting effects as well. And there is a browser also. That's kind of a slightly different aspect to it. But what we have here is, we'll start with something like, oh, let's get one of these basic shapes. You see some spheres and cubes, and what's that, a dodecahedron or something similar. There's actually a couple of others. If you look at the build menu, you see primitives here. So these are primitive shapes, and that is different from something like a set of polygons that are individually accessible. This is kind of a tight object. You cannot go to individual facets unless you change it to a different shape. Let me give you an example. If I take something like the sphere and put the sphere right here, and perhaps to see what's really going on that, we'll change the view to a flat shaded mode. Right, so you see each of the facets here, each of the polygons that make up that sphere. But that's it. You can't go into it. You can double click it to get a little bit of information. And for instance, you can change the subdivision. Right now it's got longitude and latitudes. You can change that perhaps for a coarser appearance, 6 by 6, and it's even coarser. And really it's not going to let you access each of these polygons to do some of that extrusions for the fine pulp looking thing that we saw a little bit earlier, unless we change it to a different representation. Right? Because for instance, if I go to the facet editing mode here, so you see this is the general selection tool and insert and so on, but here is where I go, as you can see on the tooltip at the bottom. Let me move this up a little bit so it doesn't get clipped out from the capture. It's an object point edit, right? So with this, we should be able to go and, for instance, focus on editing the vertices, right? And we go and select them. So make sure you go there and you click, but you can't select them. because it doesn't expose the individual facets to you unless you change the format. This is still known as a sphere object, and as such the only thing it really cares about is the position. You can possibly move it, and you do that really here at this level. You select the item, and you have to be in the selection mode, there you go, and then you can move it around, right? Or when you double click it, you'll have a position, location information, you can change it there too, numeric entry. So the trick to understand how you can turn this into something a little bit more organic and shape it and extrude some of these facets or do beveling and other sort of distortions to it is to understand that sometimes when you start with an object, whether it be a cube, something like this, or whether it's some other shapes, cylinders and shapes like these, in any of these cases, it sort of has a representation of the object as a sphere or as a cube or as a cylinder, and it keeps it that way until you decide you change it to a different format. So you can convert it to a different format, and this is what these are for. This is really important to understand, that with the build menu you can keep what you currently have, but you can also change it to a different format if that's more suitable and more practical for what you want to do with it. And so one thing that you can do is you can turn it into a mesh representation, a polygon mesh. So now you will have access to each of those polygons. Let me take a look at what that does. For instance, if I select this item, let me delete the other object and select just this one here. So let's go move that perhaps in the middle here, and let's work on this one, the perspective view. In fact, let's go and switch it to one view in perspective mode and rotate it a little bit. And so now I'm going to say, okay, I need to turn this into a polygon facet mode so that I can, so a mesh basically. So if I turn this into a mesh, okay, then I can go and edit that. So here's the point and facet edit mode, and I can go and select vertices, for instance. If I want to click them, let's make sure you use the selection tool here, and then you can select individual facets, or you can go to the, excuse me, that was the vertices. I really want to get the facets. So let's go to the facet selection tool, and now here you can select the individual facets. All right, so that's really what I want to get to, and we saw that in another tutorial. You can right click to select other facets as well. And at that point you're not going to edit here to change the orientation or so on. You do that here. This is a sort of a group of commands to extrude and do a variety of other things to those selected facets, but ones. So if you select one and perhaps this one with the right click, only those two will be transformed or will be acted upon. And so for instance, one I'll do is the extrude faces, and extrude, just click and drag, and perhaps I want the others too now, so I'm going to add this. Oh wait, I need to go to this tool, the selection tool, add these two, right, and then I'm going to extrude again, and now I got them too, but I'm going to make them a little bit smaller. So change the size. This is the facet size reduction or reshape, there you go, and then now I can do another extrusion. Now here, as you do that, you'll find that it may be tedious to go back and forth to that interface, and it may help to use the shortcuts, the keyboard shortcuts. Right, so check what the bottom tooltip indicator shows here: extrude faces and extrude faces connected, and a couple of other choices. There's like the scale faces, Shift K, so uppercase. So if you want to change the size, you do a Shift K, and then you can go change the size. And then you want to go back to this one, that's Shift X, uppercase X, so that way you can do another extrusion. Let's do the rotation also. I think there's one here, and that will be Shift R for rotate. That's easier to remember. Let's turn it around a little bit, like so, and then do another Shift X for another extrusion. Let's make sure it goes the right direction, and the Shift R again, and then the Shift X one more, and then you know what, we need to make it smaller. So what was that? Shift K to change the size, and then Shift R for rotate, and Shift X for extrude. So you see I'm starting to get really fast through that now as I'm using both hands. Left hand with the keyboard, I'm using the Shift, what is it next, X for extrude and R for rotate, and Shift K to change the size. and Shift X again. So I can create some interesting shapes pretty quickly. Here I'm going to now do something else, which is to go back to the object, scale the whole thing down a little bit. So first I need to select it as the object. There you go. Then I can go and scale it down a little bit, and I can see all of those extrusions I've done, and I can rotate it. All right, and I want to give it a little bit more of an organic look now. It's very faceted there, very low polygon. Again, if I change the view to a flat, you can see there's only a few polygons involved. So what I'll do is I'll change that again under the build menu, where we were able to change it first of all, converting it to a mesh. We can also do something else there, which is subdividing the faces. Right, now you can do that as long as the object is selected and it is an object in this format, the mesh format, that can be subdivided. Right, so let's go do that and click that. So it's now a finer mesh. If I look at it in a smooth shaded mode, it's going to appear a little bit smoother. And so I can do that a few times. So let's restart from scratch here and actually do that on the entire object. Let's delete the object. I used the delete key for that. And then I'm going to create a new one, and this time I'll start with the sphere. And I'll put the sphere right in here. All right, let's keep it flat shaded for now. Let's view flat. And convert it, remember, build, convert to mesh. All right, and then, so now here we should be able to select all of the facets. Let's go to the facet editing mode first. And make sure we're on facet and not vertex or edges, but on facets. And go and select, and now we can't, we could select this one and right click and right click and right click and select one by one, but that will only allow us to select the ones that we see, and we really want to select them all. So I recommend using this one here. This one allows you to select a portion, right click to select and add to the selection. And then if you rotate the whole thing, you would see it from the other side, and it would essentially show that it's been selected too. You can also do Control A. That will select all, right? That's a standard command under the Edit menu, select, wherever it is. Control A is a shortcut. You can, there, select all. So with that, you can go and select all. One thing that's also interesting is sometimes you want to select a group that you can select with this tool. And then you say, no, actually, I wanted the opposite. I want all of the others. And maybe you also add to the selection with this, and you add this and this and this, right? And now you say, no, I'd like to select everything else except what I've currently got, right? I got selected a cap here, and I got a little band here of a few polygons. And I'd like to select actually the other set of polygons. What you can do is you can go to the Edit menu and select menu, submenu here has some options, including invert the selection. Right, there's a shortcut I think, and what that does is selects all of the other polygons. All right, but anyway, in our case, we'll do Control A because we want to select them all, and what we'll do is we'll still be in the facet selection mode, and now we'll start extruding. So one I'd like to use is this one here. That's the inset, to make them a little bit smaller. All right, so as I'm doing that, you can, oh wait, I did the selection here. I didn't select that inset yet, so Control A to select them all. Inset, and now you can see that I can click and drag and make sort of an inset polygon. I can also go the other way. That's wrong. I mean, that's, I don't want to use that. I want to go basically small like so, right? And it's still in the same plane, but what I'll do now is an extrusion. So I'll do an extrusion like so and extrude them. All right, and then perhaps I'll go really out high, and then I'll do the inset again, but this time I'll make them bigger. So it will make sort of a bigger base again, and then I'll do another extrusion, and those are bigger. And now I'll start also rotating. So let's do a little rotation. That's this one here, right? Shift, what was that, R? So I can go to rotate those a little bit. I'll turn them to the right just a little bit, and then Shift X to extrude, and Shift K to kill the size to make them a little bit smaller, and then Shift R to rotate, and then Shift X to extrude, and Shift K to kill the size and reduce the size a little bit. Shift R to rotate some more. And you can see where I'm going with this. Shift X, extrude. And Shift K to make them even smaller. And Shift R to rotate them one more time. and Shift X. That might be the last extrusion, or maybe we'll have one more, but it'll be very long and very thin. So what I'll actually do is I'll rotate them one more time, Shift R, like so. And now I'll do not the extrusion we did before, but there's one, this one here, that's the Shift P, peak, yeah, peak faces. With that I can extrude them to a peak, so it'll be a very pointy end, and you can make them very long. We'll keep them like so. Alright, so that's that, and at that point I'll go back to the main selection tool, make sure I select the object, and I can change the size a little bit so I can see it all. I can rotate the whole object. Look at that spiky little nasty thing. I mean, this is, if you step on one of those in the ocean, that's gonna hurt. You know, it's almost like one of those whatever shall we call them, a notachi, right? Let's go and make this a little bit more organic looking. I love this 3D, by the way. You can just dive into it and look at that. Okay, so I'm going to give it a more organic look now, and so to do that, make sure that it is the selected object, and then you go to the build, and you can go and it is still a converted mesh, but you can go to subdivide to faces. So you can do that. All right, and it gets a little bit more organic looking, and do it again, and perhaps one more time, and then I think we have a nice smooth appearance for the whole thing. Look at that. All right, so now at this point it's still in the scale mode, and of course we can go into it if we make it too big. We can also look at it in the smooth mode or in the wireframe mode. Boy, there's a lot of polygons there now. Smooth, look at that. Okay, and perhaps one more thing we'll want to do. Well, you know, there's all sorts of material shading and other things to try. Let's just turn this into an image. Let's look at it from this end and turn this into an image for our brush. So we'll need to define the settings here. Actually, we'll probably need to set the render image. We'll need to set the renderer, scanline or OpenGL. Either one is probably fine for that initial view. Anti-aliasing, do we want it the best possible? And then render image. And we'll render it. Let's do a quick test first. All right, well, that's fairly good, but maybe the background color should change. So let's go back to image and change the background color to, you know what, let's use blue or green, because in that way we can use the blue screen or the green screen keying to remove that, or any other color that's not in the shape or the color of the object itself, right? This one is a gray object, default shading, so it's got white and black and grays, anything across that. We can probably key to red or blue or green, any of these. Let's take the pure blue and make it a much higher resolution image, maybe 1024 by 1024. Right, and then we want it anti-alias, we want the image. Do we want the alpha channel? You know what, that actually would be very useful. We could then, that way we don't have to do the color keying. Let's finish this tutorial with that, right? How to save that with the alpha channel. So we'll have the image and the alpha channel. Oh god, look at that, you can even do a depth channel. Okay, we'll do that in a different tutorial. But the alpha channel, hey, you know, the color itself doesn't actually matter in the end, because the alpha channel is going to do the masking for us. So this rendering is going on right there. And I guess what we can do, well, we clipped it off. I don't know if it's going to be clipped off in the entire image. Maybe we need to do one more here to make sure that we zoom out a little bit. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how far we need to go, because the whole image, the capture is 1280, the picture needs to be about 1024. Let's probably be about this, and we don't waste too much for the edge around it. Let's go render this final puppy here. Go. Alright, still doing the image and the alpha. Alright, and then so now we need to save that. We can look at the color of the image, that's there, that's the color channels, and then here's the alpha channel. Quick note here, Dogwaffle will see the black as invisible, because for Dogwaffle it's the opposite of transparency. It's kind of the opacity, and white as fully transparent for Dogwaffle will mean fully opaque. So we'll have to invert that mask, but that's okay. That's one click away. So we have both of these, and we can go save that. So we can take the color channel and save that. And I'm going to save that in a file as a BMP or JPEG. Does it matter? Nah, probably not. Let's go to BMP and save that under the rendered section. And what shall we call this, by the way? We need to give this a name. The thing something, right? So hairy thing. It's not really hairy. Hairy thing 001. There you go. And that's just the color. So we'll put C for color, and the other one will have A for alpha, right? The alpha channel, or M for mask. You develop your naming convention for that. But I'll say hairy thing 001C and save that. And then we are done. And we can go to the alpha channel and do the same thing, right? And save that again to the BMP, and the file name, instead of calling it this, we'll call it almost the same, but we'll change the C for alpha. That will be the alpha channel. All right. So now, how do we use this in Dogwaffle? Right? We've got the two. Let's go to launch Dogwaffle here. And this is PD Pro, what is it, 8.1, I think. And I'll scale it to match our screen capture. All right, so one thing we have, there's a couple of ways to import an image. And you can go to Open, and if it's in Targa, TGA format, it will load it with our own import module, or if it's in any other format, it will use ImageMagick to load it. So it's got the ImageMagick converter to convert it to Targa temporarily in a temp Targa file, and then load that. And if I look here, I should find the two that I just created, right? This one here, the hairy thing. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Bigger previews. There you go. And then the hairy thing C for the color channel and A for alpha channel. All right, so I could load that, but of course it doesn't know that this is representing the color and this represents the alpha channel. If I load it, it will just load it as is, as a color image. And the one of the problems with that too is that okay, it sees no alpha channel on this. This represents, however, what we want to use as the alpha channel. So one thing we can do here is just say, well, let's load that or transfer that to the alpha channel. Right. Well, first of all, we'll need to invert it too, because right now the white part represents transparent, but for Dogwaffle this looks fully opaque and visible, and the black part will be the transparent side. So we need to invert it. Let's go to Image and invert it, and that will be right there. So that's a little bit better, right, as far as using this in the alpha channel. So how do we get this into the alpha channel? There is an indirect way and there is a direct way. The direct way is we say, let's go to the selection, or alpha if you have an earlier version of Dogwaffle, and say store it. Well, right now we're not storing this image, we're storing whatever is in alpha by default, which is, everything is selected, the entire image is there. So we're not actually seeing this shape or this pattern. But what we can do is we can say, grab it here, get buffer, get the image buffer. And what it does is it transfers that into our stored copy here. This is a stored copy of what could be in the alpha channel. How do we get it back into the alpha channel? How do we get it to show the marching ants along this selection line? Well, we just click on replace. So now not only do we have a stored copy here, but it's also in place inside Dogwaffle. Right? So that's how we can put that in. Now we need to turn our attention to the actual color image. We just loaded the alpha channel, and I mentioned there is another way. This one was sort of the direct way, which means we store and then we grab it from the color channel into the alpha stored image and then place it back into the alpha. Okay, there is another way. Let's go and clear the selection and clear the image, or rather have that, use this image, and now what I'll do is I'll copy it to another image buffer called the swap buffer. If you're not familiar with Dogwaffle, don't worry about it too much. I mean, it's kind of similar to another layer. It's not really that though, because we also have other layers at the same time. So what the swap buffer does, we can do here, we can swap the two buffers. There's one here. It's kind of like the back side or the flip side of a page. You take a frame or a canvas on which you paint, and then you turn it around and you'll see the swap buffer. You swapped it to the other side. So I'm going to go to the swap buffer, not by switching it there, but rather by copying it there. So I still have it here in the main buffer as well. You can, by the way, see here that I'm on the main buffer. In the header of the window decoration here, it shows main. And if I were to switch it, J for, or swap buffers. J stands for jump, right? So jump between the two. You can see that it's going to jump. So it's now on the swap buffer, and then back to the main buffer. So J, lowercase j, and I can also use uppercase J, and that will not jump between, it will copy it over. Right? So let me try that. Let's undo that. So I'm going to jump back to the main buffer, and now I'm going to do Shift J to copy. You're not seeing any change, but it's now also in the swap buffer. And if you were to J to jump, you can see the swap buffer here now, but it's still looking at the same image because we had made a copy into it, right? We copied it. So I'm going to go back to the main buffer because I don't need to see. I know in the swap buffer I have this, and I can copy what's in the swap buffer directly to the alpha channel, right? Here's the alpha option menu. Under the image menu, alpha, copy swap buffer to alpha, right? So that will put it directly. Now you see the marching ants as expected, right? And that selection, by the way, you can also get right here stored as get alpha. You could use that. It's the same thing, but I mean, it's just another way to do it. All right, so we have a stored copy of it here. We can go and clear the image buffer. We see the marching ants of the selection mask currently in effect. If we do any sort of painting, let's say if we do some oil, I don't know, large cover in pink or red, we see it will only paint through that mask, right? That's a selection mask. Right click to use the other colors, and so the selection mask will prevent, the alpha channel here will prevent painting outside of it. Well, okay, so that's one thing. We've loaded the alpha channel, and we know how to get it into the alpha channel in Dogwaffle, right? We have another image though, and that's this one. So let's go, that's the color one, so the color channel. Let's go in, and instead of using open, I want to show you another way to get it in, and that's the general file converter. That one I think we added in version 5 or 6 or 7, excuse me. So what you do with that, this is a separate program. It's running outside of Dogwaffle in its own address space, but it can communicate, it can send the image and connect to Dogwaffle to import something that's currently in Dogwaffle, or you can export it to whatever you have here. You can export that to Dogwaffle. Now initially when I launched the general file converter, it already grabbed a copy of what's in Dogwaffle, so that's sort of something it does automatically. But what I'd like to do really is go to the file and open a file that I have here, and that contains my BMP. Now you can indicate here what format you want. It will load BMP, GIF, JPEG, EXIF, PNG, and TIFF. Right? And so if I use that for BMP, it will show me just the BMP files. And I'm going to go to the color channel. This is the alpha we've already loaded the other way, and now I'm going to go to the color channel. And in the color channel, what I'll do is, I'll expect to see those gray values. There they are. You can zoom to fit. It doesn't change the actual image. It's just for the viewing, so you can see it a little bit faster. And then you can click to unzoom. And you can do a couple of things. You can copy that to the clipboard if you want, and paste it somewhere else from there. But most importantly, you can also do some basic resize and get some image information. Let's see, how big is it? Yep, 1024, 1024. What's the format? We found 24-bit RGB. That's good. And so now what we can do is you can connect to Dogwaffle and send it there. Export to PD. Right. So as we do that, the image gets transferred to Dogwaffle, and the alpha channel is still there. It didn't affect it, right? So it only got into the RGB channels. We can close this now, and so in the image in Dogwaffle, we now have the transferred color image inside the RGB channels, and we have still the alpha channel that we have also a snapshot copy here of. So that's one way that you can sort of reconstruct this image. You have, out of Anim8or, we had saved two separate images, right? We had saved, where is it? There. We had the color channel and the alpha channel, and we saved them separately in two different images. And then in Dogwaffle, you're able to reconstruct that and put them back together by loading one into the color channel and the other one goes into the alpha channel. Right, and so there's probably a couple of other ways to do that, but this is certainly a fairly elegant way, or an interesting way, because it explains a couple of things and intrinsics of how Dogwaffle works, or what some of the tools you can use. And obviously one thing I'd like to do also is grab the whole thing now, pick it up as a brush. And there's actually a really cool way to do that, a shortcut way here under the brush menu. It says right here at the beginning, Control B or is the shortcut, or use selected as brush. So since we have a selection, since we have that alpha mask there, and you know, if you doubt it, you can always go back and grab another snapshot copy here from the selection or alpha menu and say store alpha. There you go. White is selected, that's for the Dogwaffle world. White is enabled or visible or selected. Black is hidden, invisible, right? And so we can go, that's the selection, so we can go use the brush menu here, use the selection as brush, or use selected parts, selected pixels as brush. Bingo. Now once it's done that, we can do the preview here. I had it enabled by default, but if you don't have that enabled, click here for the preview and you'll see the brush moving along. You can also make it more opaque. By default, the opacity is probably not 100%. You can do that here, or you can do that in the settings area of the brush. There's the opacity here. All right, so make sure it's fully opaque, and then that way your preview will show fully opaque. And you can paint with that. This is really a brush image now. We fully transparent mask around it, and there's tons of other things you can do with that. Since this is a custom brush, we'll want to store it right there under the brush menu. Go to the store and manage, and there's all sorts of things we can do with that. We can go also enable, let's go to the custom tab here in the brush settings and enable custom brush transforms, because this is a fairly large image. On a slow system it may be slow to transform that, so we don't necessarily allow it by default or enable it, but you can certainly do that. You can override it, and nowadays with the fast computers we have, it's probably a no-brainer, and it can go really fast. Let's change the steps to a really small value, as you see here, and also reduce that randomness. Right now, as I'm moving, it's kind of jumping around randomly. I'm going to look for random position. That's probably the culprit. Yep, there it is. Let's go reduce that to 0. So now it's a little bit more in place. It still does oh, probably a random angle. There it is. Look at that. It's got some random rotation going. So that's a little bit better. Now it still rotates, but it's changing rotation based on the direction in which I'm drawing. That's what that is. So it's got this one here. That's the shortcut to use the direction of the pointer motion to determine the angle of the brush. You can also uncheck that. When you uncheck that, it's basically staying in place. All right. So there's so many different things you can do now that that image that started in Anim8or is in your brush. And to finish, I'll just enable one more thing, which is the mirror, and that's a couple of the choices here. You've got kaleidoscopes. Let's not overdo it. Let's go to vertical mirror and see if I can do something really fancy. Let's enable both vertical and horizontal, and we'll get something fancy. All right. There's of course a whole lot more to explore, but I think that this is really an interesting one to stop this tutorial with. So let's call this a day. Thanks for watching.